Good evening, good evening. Welcome along. Bank Holiday Monday over in the UK. I hope it's going well for you. Another edition of Inspire and Be Inspired, and today something rather special indeed. As you can see, I'm going to be joined live on air by Mr. Lee Fisher and Jim Shaft Ryan, two gentlemen most definitely responsible for helping to build the foundations of the house music scene in Birmingham. Before I bring the guys on, I want to say hi to everybody with us live, and of course yourself who's catching the recording after a busy bank holiday. You can see in the top left-hand corner of the screen, if you enlarge it, if you're watching it on a desktop, or if you're watching on a mobile phone, you can tilt it on the side for a better view. We got a few people who liked past videos and also who are fans of the page. So thank you all for your support, guys. Yesterday we did a little sound check, and I've got to admit I was absolutely blown away when I sat back and thought about these two gentlemen, the journey that I've personally had with them and everything that they're responsible for. We're not going to be able to cover everything that they have done in their time in Birmingham, but we're going to have a good job at breaking open how and why Birmingham is considered, or was considered at least, the epicenter of the clubbing culture of the UK. Right, I'm just going to bring the guys on because I'm rabbiting on here and they can explain it a lot better than I can. We have Mr. Lee Fisher and Jim Shaft Ryan. Good evening, gentlemen. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Lee.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Andy. You good?
Yes, we're very good. So I can see that the viewers are rolling in already, and people, when they share and we get the little graphics that come up. So a big thank you to Pugwash for sharing, and everybody else who shares that I'll give some shouts out a little bit later on. I've got to begin just to repeat, there is no way that we are going to be able to cover everything that we would like to cover in this short conversation. But what I hope to do is shed some light on the scene, basically for myself really, the scene in Birmingham before, I guess, the acid house era, the however you would call it, mid to late 80s. You guys were around at the beginning of all of this, and we were just discussing ages. Jim's maybe got a couple of years on us, so I'm going to come to Jim first, even though you are at the top, Lee. I'll get to you in a second. Jim, with a few years on us, can you just paint a picture of the landscape in Birmingham in the let's say 1985? Let's put a timestamp on it. Your perception of Birmingham 1985, 1986 times.
Right. Certainly a case of age before beauty, but 1985. I think 1985, if I can recollect correctly, was more or less the time when Mega Active opens, and from what I can remember, I think it was possibly 86 maybe, and I think that was a big turning point in Birmingham club scene. I mean, there was prior to that clubs that had a massive reputation, like the Rum Runner. I think, pretty much everybody that was that touched upon that sort of new romantic scene, for want of a better term, were connected in some way. Even some of the huge artists, the huge international artists that came from that scene, and obviously, Duran were born from there. So,
well, can you give us sorry to cut you off. Can you give us an oversight of the Rum Runner? Because to many people, they will have heard the stories and know roughly what it's about. But paint the picture of what the Rum Runner was, because that is clearly one of the biggest things around at the time.
I mean, it was certainly a very special club, and it certainly stood out from the crowd, the clubbing crowd that was around at that time, where I suppose clubs were essentially places that were pulling joints, essentially.
Right.
They didn't really have a musical direction as such. They would be playing chart music. And the Rum Runner, created a scene, and as a result of that, I don't know whether that was a, 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 a scenario that was wholeheartedly put together, but there was a scene there, and the people that ran it managed Duran Duran. And I mean, from what my recollection, it was a very small club, but it had people that went there felt as if they were had an opportunity to express themselves, not only in the way that they dressed, but also in the music that was put across there. And it wasn't fundamentally one style of music. There was a Saturday night, if I remember correctly, Dick was responsible for the DJing playlist. And then there was people like Sean Williams, Sean and Mambo that used to do a jazz funk night on a Monday night. But you could be assured that the music or the soundtrack was always going to be a little bit different. And as a result of that, as young people, you felt as if you were identified as a result of going to a club of that nature. So yeah, it was an exciting time, and you felt as if you were embracing something that was certainly not universal and certainly not part of the Birmingham scene generally.
Right. Okay. So alongside the Rum Runner, without us talking about them too much, what other clubs would have been running? Was the Night Out? The Dome used to be called the Night Out. I only remember that because my mum and dad used to go. Was that open? That would have been open the same time then.
Okay.
The Locarno.
The Locarno, as my old man used to call it, the Larry Carno in his Irish brogue. There was let me think, like Samantha's Pollyannas, the Cedar Club,
Holy City Zoo,
the Holy City Zoo, which was kind of a similar club to the Rum Runner. I'm trying to think whether Barbarellas would have been still around. I mean, certainly the early time of the Rum Runner, but possibly the sort of early 80s, late 70s, that was still around. I mean, the club scene in Birmingham was pretty much run by the Futurals.
Yeah.
Pretty much every club, irrespective of what style of music that was going on, was the Futurals would have been responsible for it. So all that John Bright Street, there was Rebecca's there. I don't know whether that was Rebecca's or had it transformed into Boogies. That might have been a little bit later.
Top Rank was happening as well, Jim.
Top Rank, yeah, absolutely. Top Rank, yes.
I used to go roller skating at the Top Rank on a Sunday.
Nice one.
Yeah. I mean, there was lots of clubs in Birmingham.
Jim, do you remember a club? And I think it was in the spot maybe where Nightingale's was, called Venus.
It was a little bit further down the road, actually. I think it was again.
Yeah, you're right. It was above the Hippodrome on the opposite.
Yes, and I think that ended up becoming a club that was owned by the guys that ran Hawkins. Do you remember Hawkins Wine Bar?
Bottom of not Corporation Street.
End of Corporation Street. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that those guys took, God, they rebranded it, and it became a bit more of a swanky up marketplace. But yeah, Venus, whenever I went there, it was empty. I went there a few times. A couple of mates of mine used to DJ a couple of there occasionally. A guy called Don Scully, who ended up running 49ers, and another guy called John Sweeney. So, but there was never anybody in there from my recollection anyway.
So what for yourself, Lee?
I guess the other ones I remember around that time as well, you got Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, yeah. Which prior to that was La Dolce Vita.
Yeah. And I think you got the Romulus as well, hadn't you?
Yes, that's right, which became Liberties. Yes, the Romulus sort of in the late 70s again was kind of a club that had a bit of a scene to it. And it kind of, I suppose, shadowed Barbarella's, and but it was more of a nightclub as such in terms. I think some bands play there. I think there's a and I certainly didn't see them there, but I think Joy Division and supported by Dexy's Midnight Runners, I think that gig took place in the Romulus. But it was only a tiny. It was the downstairs part of Liberties, which became Toots, I think. Wow. That little room.
I forgot all about Toots.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so that paints the picture of the scene mid 80s, because for myself you hear about all of these things and I've never really researched it too much. And as we were talking yesterday, Lee, you made a comment to say, well, from what I gather, Andy, you don't do a lot of research, you just like to do it on the fly when you're talking. Well, that's a lot. I like that. Do you know what I mean? I think it makes it more natural. We twist and turn, so much so that I actually just started talking to you guys. I didn't even introduce you and let everybody know what legends you are, but we'll get to that in a little while. I guess the whole point of why I wanted to bring you on is because you guys were there for the birth of the house scene in Birmingham. Jim, my earliest recollections are of your boat parties. Maybe you'll nudge a memory out of me that there are other things attached to that. And Lee, for yourself, for Pure Records, and again, maybe you'll remind me of other things that went before that. So I'll bring you back to the Mega Active, Jim, because that is definitely something that I remember with fondness, walking through those doors, up the tiers, and coming to your shop stall. Lee, did you say that you had a place in there as well?
Yeah, so it's a weird one because I kind of left Birmingham at the end of '86, and I went to live in London, and I started working in the rag trade in London, and I was working in a store on the King's Road. They got a place in Kensington Market called Review, and the guy that ran it, affectionately known as Disco Dave, and I kind of worked out pretty quickly that he was manufacturing some stuff through one of the guys at D-Mob and making like a ridiculous amount of money on like the stuff he was manufacturing. And I thought, do you know what? I might try and take a stall on in Brum and see if I can have a go with this. But I still continued to work in Birmingham, and I quickly became one of his biggest customers for wholesale. And it was at the time that, you got those huge jeans with the big pockets on the front. And we were knocking them out like left, right and centre out of Mega Active. And I mean, it's quite corny, but it was quite a small unit. I remember your unit was quite big, Jim, upstairs. You were on the top floor. And the unit we had, it was quite small. We were next door to Mark Kavanagh. He was knocking out some bits from World Service. And my place was called The Cooler. And I gave it a go for about, I don't know, maybe nine months. But it was kind of difficult living in London and then getting someone to work it and keeping the stock moving. But that's kind of where I sort of first sort of met Jim, really. Not to say like, hi, how you doing? But just kind of was aware of Jim and Mick and what the guys were doing with the depot.
So it was the depot in Mega Active back then, Jim.
Yeah, we opened that. I think it was about 86, 85 or 86. We actually saw Mega Active through. We had a stall in there from the beginning to the end of the Mega Active era. But this, I mean, I suppose we could be described, both me and my brother, as products of the enterprise allowance scheme. I had a job at the time. I worked at Birmingham Uni as a computer operator, and Mick had finished uni, and he was always one that wanted to, didn't ever want to work for anybody. He always had that sort of instinct. I mean, the Mega Active thing came about completely by accident. I saw an advertisement in the Evening Mail saying, "Are you interested in opening a stall and becoming a fashion designer or something of that nature?" And kind of rang the person up who put it in the Evening Mail. And 6 months later, they called me up and said, "Are you still interested in opening a store?" And we were kind of put on the spot. And like I said, my brother Michael was very, very enterprising. And both of us were kind of footloose and fancy free at the time. Even though I had a job, I had no real responsibilities. And we were in a really good position because he was on the dole at the time. So he got the enterprise allowance, and we hustled around. In fact, we just went around Birmingham, the clothing area of Birmingham, which at the time was Constitution Hill. We didn't really have an iota of an understanding of the clothing business at all. And we went into this one wholesale place, and this gentleman gave us a copy of Menswear, and the back of Menswear there was all advertisements for various people that were wholesaling, what have you. And we contacted, well, in fact, I contacted the people while I was working, using the phone at work to contact them. And we went down to one shirt manufacturer in Romford, and he pointed us in the right direction to numerous people who assisted us and gave us sort of insight into it, gave us, I suppose, they didn't rip us off, essentially, which we were essentially,
you were
I suppose,
wide open for.
Wide open for it. We had a bit of money to spend. We managed to get, I think, a $5,000 overdraft from the bank that I was using at the time, and which was non-guaranteed as well, which was quite amazing. I think possibly because I had a job. And as I said, they saw us coming, but no, they could have seen us coming, but these people were big-hearted and pointed us in the right direction. We ended up sort of, I suppose, clothing that we liked. It wasn't really a direction as such, and found bits and pieces that we liked and filled the store up, and kind of learnt the business on our feet, so to speak. So it was, we were very fortuitous being at the right place at the right time, and decent folk kind of possibly seeing something in us and assisting our cause.
So how did you? Who were your tribe? Who were your main punters that were coming and buying from you? Friends, or did you
initially? I suppose
rapidly create a niche for yourself?
Well, I think we certainly, as time moved on, we created a niche, but I think we were reliant on friends and family and folks popping into Mega Active and stumbling upon us. So yeah, there was no other intention other than let's do this, let's have a go.
Brilliant. So eventually, again, I got to say, we're skirting over this because I'm sure that's a story in itself. The whole depot, the depot story, and Lee as well with his store. Somewhere down the line, somebody would have said, did the selling the tickets come before you yourselves got into clubbing, or were you selling tickets first? So I'm curious to get to that point where you're both, DJs.
Selling tickets came, well, we opened the shop a year later, which gave me the opportunity to finish my job. So we both had two areas to run. The tickets came, I think, as a result of being friends with Dick. He used to put on, again, I can't pinpoint the years, but he started putting events on at the Portland Club, Dial B for Beauty. And we were a ticket agent for that, and that kind of opened the door for us to become a ticket agent as the club, the Rave Scene, came about. And I think that's similar with you as well, Lee. You were selling tickets at Pure Records, weren't you?
Yeah. I mean, obviously the kind of the rave thing and the shop, but I guess my route into DJing was, I guess, from the background of being a musician. And I mean, one of the key reasons I moved to London was I was in a band at the time, and we've been kicking around the Birmingham scene since about 1983, and it got to about 86, and I was like, we're just hamsters on a wheel here, and it was kind of like, we need to get down to London. Got down to London, the band broke up about a month later, which is just typical. But I think I just kind of immersed myself in the culture of London at the time, and where I was working on the King's Road in Chelsea, just kind of got to meet some great people, like, very quickly, just through the working in the shop scene, and meeting people like Johnny Rocker and Vern, who was from Shropshire, out of Stretch and Vern. And again, these were people that were sort of exploring musical ideas. So we kind of grouped together, but didn't really get round to kind of making any music per se. We were just, kind of immersed in that hip hop culture that was emerging in London around about 86. And through moving around with those people, we could see that there was a definite shift in musicianship to producers, and we were like, hold on a minute, this is interesting. A year, 2 years ago, it was all bands, and now all of a sudden, people are making music in a very different way. So we were kind of alerted to that, and kind of got very interested in that culture, and that sort of opened up doors. So I actually began DJing in London, right, before I DJ'd in Birmingham, which was the way I got in. I sort of started spinning in '87 in London.
Okay, and how did Pure Records come about then?
So again, Pure Records is probably a consequence of first and foremost a friendship with a very special friend, Mark Baxter. And so what happened was I started a acid house night in the Warwick Room at the Hummingbird in 1988, and I used to travel back from London Thursday nights to do this Thursday night acid house night. And some of the first people that I kind of experienced and came across at the club were like loads of Villa fans, and Mark Baxter just always kind of made himself aware to me. People like Stuart Belcher and Jock Lee. So I kind of tuned into these guys very quickly, and the club grew very quickly because the acid house thing was exploding.
And that was a Thursday?
It was a Thursday night, yeah, Thursday night in the Warwick Room. And it was like, we started it in the July in '88 in the Warwick Room. And I think by September, we just couldn't fit any more people out, and it spilled out into the big room on Thursday nights, which was just insane. It was just the thing, we just watched the thing explode. But I've got to say, it was like the first kids that I came across with that type of music was like all these young lads from the Villa. And that's how I met Mark, and kind of moved back to Birmingham '89. And then Kay and I had our daughter, and sort of started to bump into Mark again. And we just sort of explored the idea of setting up a record shop. And I think around about the end of 1990, we sort of worked on the idea of Pure Records. And again, it comes back to the Mega Active connection, because we opened the store on the top floor of Folio 50, which was in Digbeth High Street. And I think, Andy, I remember bumping into you in and around the scene, but I distinctly remember the first time that I actually spoke to you, and you came to the counter in Folio 50, and you got like a yellow puffer coat on, and I sort of started sorting your tunes out. So yeah, it was the way Pure Records came around was really through meeting Mark through Acid House on a Thursday night for a club we were doing, and keeping that friendship going. Then 2 years later, we're in business with a record shop.
It's great. I don't remember Thursdays. I don't remember a lot about those times. It's again an entire story in its own right that around that era. So. And we'll come back to talking about the legendary Hummingbird. But Jim, when did thoughts of you guys getting into clubbing evolve? Because again, my earliest memories are coming to your Chuff Chuff parties. Were they the first events that you did on the boats?
No, that's kind of right. I mean, again, similar pathway with myself and Lee. I was in a band back in the sort of early 80s. Again, with Mick, funnily enough, we did quite a lot of things together, me and my brother. And we had, I was talking to my daughter earlier on about it. We had a kind of electronic band where I was playing the bass. We had a rhythm unit called Dr. Rhythm, one of these cheap Roland Dr. Rhythms, which I've still got tucked away somewhere. And Mick had an ARP Axe synthesizer. We thought, I mean, we clearly thought we were Jack the Lads, and did a demo. The demo got nowhere. But then when we opened Mega Active, we continued that kind of journey to a certain extent. So we created a new band, And this one was called Switch On, I think, if I remember rightly. And again, did a demo. It was more of a kind of a funky sound, this was, rather than sort of an out and out sort of, I suppose, replication of things like orchestral maneuvers in the dark with our original sort of concept. And we did a PA at Mega Wine Bar, which was Mega's Wine Bar, I think it was called. Sorry, it was
right next door.
Yeah, right next door. Yeah, which thankfully nobody's documented that. And I suppose I always collected records. I mean, there was no real pattern in the collection, you know, whatever I was kind of into at the time. But Megas gave me the opportunity to play records on they had a system, it wasn't a couple of Technics decks, one of those all-in-one things, right, upstairs. And, you know, we'd bring our records in and gave me the difference between playing one record after another, channels and what have you. So that was kind of my introduction into playing records. And then there was a lad called Steve Tempo, I think he used to call himself. Well, he used to do some nights in the West End bar. And he was, I can't remember, he was off for a few weeks and asked me would I cover for him, and that was kind of my first delving into DJing. But in terms of the nights that we did, I mean, there was, again, I suppose the big influence in us. There was two influences. Number one, what Dick was doing was certainly an influence on us in Birmingham, and he and I think Mark Kavanagh, funny enough, did a boat trip prior to us doing one. Okay. And they did a couple of boat trips, and that seemed like what underlined that further, we made some friends with some lads from London, some West Ham fans. We met them when we were on holiday in EOS in probably about 86, maybe 87. Now, those guys, from my perspective, we became good pals with them. They used to put boat trips on with Jeff Young, and there was a number of DJs amongst those lads as well. And but it was very much a soulful sound, and I was just flabbergasted because there was just nothing like that happening in Birmingham. There was just a sort of community feeling where they were all into the music. They were all that was the thing that drove them. They were all West Ham fans. They kind of embraced us as mates. And when we decided to do our first boat trip, they joined us. We used two of their DJs, and this was probably about 87, 88, maybe. I can't remember the exact date, but you know, we were familiar with the house scene because house music was played in Mega Active on a regular basis, and at the time I was probably buying the occasional house record, but it wasn't necessarily the driver for the sound that I was interested in. Right. But these guys, we booked them to play. Neil and Taffy came up and they played acid house on the boat, and it was kind of our introduction. And I mean, it was just, you know, again, the audience that were there embraced it straight away, and it was quite a remarkable experience, just seeing how quickly people sort of embrace that music, that soundtrack, which, you know, I can honestly say that, you know, we weren't into it at the time, but, you know, it didn't take us long to sort of embrace it ourselves. And you know, and the parties that were going on, certainly in the Birmingham scene, I never went to your events, Lee, but, you know, I think it was they were probably around the same time as things like Dick's Dial B and the Rococo Club, and around those times, which again were probably more of a rare groove, an eclectic.
That's
at
the Edgbaston Reservoir.
Edgbaston Reservoir, yeah, and you know, it was a much more eclectic sound. I mean, I remember hearing Soul to Soul first track. The first time I heard that was at Rococo, I think.
Wow. So that's like 88, 87, 88.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and again, you know, they were kind of the Mega Active crowd. All those Folio 50 was a big sort of influence, the way people were dressing. Hopefully, we had some sort of connection with that as well. But you know, Folio 50 was certainly the shop that people sort of embraced in Birmingham.
Most definitely. High-waisted trousers, the big belts, the big flares.
Yeah, that's right.
Or if you were like me, because I was so tall, I could never find anything to wear in Folio 50, so I had to shop out of my mum's catalogue. So there's all my mates with the massive kipper ties, really cool second-hand jackets and trousers, and here's me looking like some twat in his Prince of Wales checked tie. But it was crazy because, and then we would be going to the Dome, for example, dancing to Taylor Dane, Tell It to My Heart one week, and the next it's like, everyone's staring at the lasers for some strange reason. That period, it was, the transition seems so quick. Is that how it seems for you, Lee, as well, around that time?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a strange one because obviously I was living in London at the time, and the rare groove thing was like huge. You kind of got the hip hop thing, '86, and we were doing some nice clubs. Like listening to the Watson Brothers playing at Delirium. Going up to the WAG, and like some of the guys I was hanging out with, like Vern, he was DJing at the WAG, and it was like the hip hop thing. Then you sort of started to hear the rare groove breaks in the hip hop. Then people got interested in playing rare groove. Then it was the rare groove thing was happening, and you kind of, I'd come back to Birmingham occasionally, and there was a couple of things that I came back to. I think I came back to a Rococo, and I think I came back to a thing at Anthony's.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
the distinct difference that I remember with London and Birmingham was like kind of Birmingham. What Birmingham was doing, it was quite Balearic before the term had been coined. Really, Birmingham was playing a big selection of music. So there'd be like a little bit of soul, a bit of rare groove, a little bit of house, a little bit of hip hop. But like London '87, it was like 86, 87, the soundtrack was just pure rare groove, and nothing else had a chance to breathe.
Right.
So that when some of these clubs started to emerge with just a pure house soundtrack at the back end of '87, it was like, fuck, what is this? It was like an express train of beats. And then, starting to hear the some of the sounds that were coming through. To me, as a musician, like starting to hear some of those records, and of course you've got things like Kiss FM, like Gordon Mack and people like Danny Rampling that got shows on there. So you're like starting to hear all this music. And to me, like looking at it from a musician's perspective, I'm thinking some of these pieces of music sound really amateurish. It was like they kind of weren't formed, or there was something not quite right about them. And, it wasn't until you kind of saw it happen in a club environment that it totally made sense. And I think for me, those were the two key differences. London was very much one soundtrack, and Birmingham was, they'd play quite a bit of everything. And, it's like, the guys like Frenchie and Eric X and all those guys, they need a lot of props because they were the first guys playing, people like Paul Dixon, all these boys, they were playing house music, but again, they'd play it alongside some soul, some Latin, the whole soundtrack was mixed. And I think the thing for me was when we came back in '88 and did Hypnosis at the Hummingbird, I'd brought that right. All we're playing is acid house. That's it, nothing else.
So that was the Fridays. Was that?
No, that was the Thursday nights.
Okay, so that was that. So when did because again, I'm not sure if I would have gone on the Thursdays, but I always, it was like our mecca to go to the Hummingbird on the Friday, and Michelle and I would always have the conversation, and we always get confused. It was Kipper Club and then Snapper Club, or was it Snapper Club and then Kipper Club?
Yeah, so it was. So basically, the Kipper Club was a guy called John Luton.
That's right, Gay John, wasn't it?
Gay John, and John, there was another friend of mine, John Slowey, and we used to kind of kick around with John. And John was doing the Kipper Club on the Fridays, and we were saying to John, well, like we really like the idea of just doing an acid house night. And he said, well, listen, we'll get you in on the Thursdays. And John sorted all that out for us, sort of set the Thursday nights up. And I think he had some sort of artistic differences and kind of called it a day and moved on. And, you know, the kipper then became the snapper. And, you know, that in itself, you know, became such a focal point. I think like 89, when I'd come back to Birmingham, I remember walking in there just going, my God, we've got 3,000 people in this room, people travelling from Leicester, Coventry, Wolverhampton, you know, like all over the West Midlands. With Jockey Lee at the wheel, just going, God, this is just insane. It's like,
but
you know,
we used to go in there early
technology.
doors. Sorry, we used to go in there early doors, and it was the remnants of some student night or alternate music, because they were all listening to James, all sit down on the carpet and everything, and they'd all get kicked out, and then we'd like crack on.
Well, it was kind of merged for a little while, wasn't it? I think the DJ at the time, Jock was telling me, I think the DJ was like Steph, and I think there was such a movement to have like the rave stuff being played that the people got quite abusive when some of that indie music was played, and I think it was round about sort of September or August, September 89 that it just became like, you know, a rave club. But yeah, I think for me, that's the key difference with Birmingham. There was always that kind of mixing of different genres of music. And, you know, when I look at what was going on in London, London was very much, you know, that one soundtrack.
Right, okay, yeah. So Jim, tell me, 89, because I have vivid memories of the Hummingbird of that era, but you're seeing that chuff chuff environment. I used to go to them, but the timeline for me is very, very hazy. So can you try and bring that into focus for me a little bit?
Yeah, it's quite hazy for me as well. But they certainly evolved. Chuff Chuff evolved from the boat trips. So, you know, I mean, and
so I didn't actually get a date from you when the first one was.
I would say that our first boat trip was, you know, it was when we opened the shop. We certainly had a lot more connection with people coming in because Mega Active was like a market stall essentially, and you know we were creating our own audience and our own people that were interested in what we were doing as a shop individually. And I think also the ticket thing was starting to kick off as well around the same time. And you know, I suppose, you know, we were there influencing people's taste, not only in what they wore, but in the music that they were listening to. And and also, you know, people would come in and they would recommend people. I mean, Lee was recommended to us as a DJ from a guy called Little Dicky, I think we used to call him. And he said, you've got to hear Lee. You've got to hear Lee Fisher. He'd come in and he'd be selling Lee like nobody's business to us. And of course, he'd be bringing in the tapes and we'd be listening to the tapes. And this is kind of, I mean, another DJ that became quite popular in the shop would be what was his name? Simon Baseline Smith. Somebody brought a recording of his from Tenerife, and that was, you know, so we would be listening to this music, and obviously that was kind of I suppose from a DJ perspective, that was influencing me as somebody that bought records. I mean, I would have been DJing on the boats, yes, but I could hardly call myself a regular DJ at the time. You know, it was more probably, if I was being totally honest, it would be, well, let's save a few quid and I'll play as well. It was one of those. And you know, I had a collection of music, so you know, there was no real sort of kind of thought, well, let's exploit this new artistic format and see where it leads me to. It was more, well, let's play a few records and have a go. So we started doing more and more boat trips, and I think Chuff Chuff evolved as a result of that. And Chuff Chuff again came about by accident. It was a flyer for one of the boat trips, and it was Rob. What was his name? Rob Johnson. Yes, Rob Johnson. He did the graphics, and he drew little boats, and I
was knocking around with Rob then. I totally forgot all about that.
Out of the little boat was Chuff Chuff, and we thought, God, that's a great name. Let's call what we do Chuff Chuff. And the boat trips became the Chuff Chuff boat trips. we started booking. We became more focused on a sound. Absolutely, Lee would play, Neil Macy, Dick. We got some of the lads from Nottingham to play. Myself, Steve Griffith, Steve Tempo. And that was kind of the latter part of, I suppose, that mixture of sound that you were talking about, Lee. We became very much focused on the house music sound. And, from those little boat trips, what happened was we got a network of people because we were going to the Hacienda, we were going to, we were spreading our wings to other clubs. We were going to the Warehouse in Leeds, and, we were connecting with people. And as a result of those connections, we would go, I think Venus might have been a little bit later, but we got to know the people that were running. I can't remember what it was called before Venus. But Sam Bowery was part of that scene just before Venus, and we were going to that club as well. And we had a network of people. There was people from Coventry that we knew. And again, they were coming into the shop. So we kind of, I suppose, groom people, for want of a better expression, who would be interested in what we were doing and, get their addresses. We had a book where we had people's names and addresses that we would put together as they come in. Are you interested in coming to a boat? Put your name and address down, and
we'll send a postcard to you.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And
how archaic.
No, really archaic. And again, there was, in my mind at the time, we essentially owned a clothes shop. We weren't really looking for an opportunity to sort of move into events. I suppose that ambition came because of the rave scene and seeing what a huge difference that was having in people's lives, and being part of it and being center of it and going to them, and I suppose doing our little thing through the boat, which essentially was an extension of our social life really at the time. It was not like I said, it wasn't something that was a calculative thing to think, yes, let's do events,
let's do this. So before the club came, before the larger one-off Chuff Chuffs, didn't it? Which I'm going to
no Chuff Chuff was well before the club.
No, okay, so let me reframe that. So had you done one-off parties off the boat in stately homes before you opened the club? Is what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to that in a second then.
Okay.
Lee, around that time, the clubs, because you mentioned Rob Johnson, Paul Moran, Steve Warner, three of my very good friends who I was knocking around with. We discovered the house music scene off the back of the soul and rare groove scene. Again, we would be going up to whatever. I could pull 1,000 names out of my memory if I had a brain. On a Wednesday night, for example, one of us had just learned to drive, so we'd take the car and go up Sutton or Mere Green or whatever. And then the next, we'd be going somewhere, and then these guys are DJing, and they were playing for you. So I can remember a better way. When was that? What era was? What year would that have been? And was there anything before it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess. There's I guess the bit that we're sort of starting to miss out is the rave scene.
Yeah.
You kind of, we got to that thing at the Hummingbird where it's like Friday night and everyone's in there, and you knew something was happening. And over in Coventry, the guys had been doing stuff. The Amnesia guys had been doing stuff. I mean, they were doing stuff on a Tuesday night over in Coventry. And that was the thing. You'd walk into these clubs on a Tuesday night or a Thursday night, all the nights that the clubs couldn't fill. And then they'd have more people in than the weekend with everyone just doing this. Do you know what I mean? It was insane. But then obviously the clubs, the clubs were too small for how big the phenomenon was growing. And I always remember 89 going to Spectrum in Tamworth, and it was like open air thing next door to a golf course. And I love golf. I play golf at most weekends with Rich Moraes. Hi Moraes, if you're listening. Like all of a sudden you knew this thing had exploded. There were like 5,000 people at Spectrum outdoor event in Tamworth. And then you kind of that rave culture really then sort of started to move really, really quickly. And I guess at that point, Jim, from being a ticket agent for like a couple of things around Birmingham. Then all of a sudden, you know, Spectrum,
Yeah.
Lifestyle 2000, Starlight,
Yeah.
Raw, this, that, the other. I mean, there was one every week.
Yeah, there was. Yes. Yes.
Know, all of a sudden, people are paying like 15 and 20 quid to get into these events, you know. And, you know, there was a ticket commission attached to every ticket that you sold, which ran about 10%, 15% at the time, Jim, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, some of them would you'd get your ticket off the ticket price, and then others you'd put your 10% on. It was always 10%, and you know, I mean, from a, you know, a small business perspective, to have that source of income, that extra source of income, was phenomenal. You know, and I suppose in from our perspective, you know, it assisted financing the development of what we were doing in terms of clubbing. It gave us a sort of cash flow to allow us to do that.
Yeah, I guess from a musical perspective, that kind of 89, it was quite magical, because
absolutely,
you could play CC Rogers someday alongside I don't know, you know, the craziest acid house record alongside something like Chris Rea, Josephine, and people would go with it. You know, so that it was almost like that kind of almost like that Balearic thing had happened. And then all of a sudden it kind of crept into 1990, and, you know, it for want of a better term, it was like, you know, only for the headstrong, and it had to be like very hardcore. And you know, the records were getting harder and harder, and you know, it's like, I was like, actually, I don't think I dig this. Do you know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, some of the tunes were great, but you know, there was some of the music that was coming out at that point, I was just like, I'm not feeling this. And I kind of sort of, I guess, looked at a more sort of US / Italian European sound. And I think at that point you'd kind of, there was a term that came up, and it was almost like a fork in the road, where the rave scene then sort of started to become, I guess, what the term at the time, I started hearing this term called jungle techno. It was like, what? Mickey Finn had played a record, I think it was Meat Beat Manifesto, and he played it sped up, and it was like this breakbeat, and like everyone's getting mad about this tune, and someone turned around and went, have you heard this jungle techno tune? I'm like, that's Meat Beat Manifesto. They're like a European band from God knows where. And it's like, and then all of a sudden this kind of breakbeat sound started to emerge. And then there was a real kind of fork in the road with the scenes. So you kind of got the rave scene that had kind of turned into this, I guess the term was jungle techno. And people started to call the music that I was into mellow.
Yeah, that's right. The mellow scene.
You would say that in like the side room, you'd be chewing your lips, saying, so are you hardcore or mellow?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm playing mellow in the broom. And it was I think it was a real defining time in 1990, and it certainly made me realize what I wanted to do and what I wanted to explore. And I guess I think that's kind of when you were saying that, Jim, that young Dickie dropped you that tape in.
Yeah.
And that's when we kind of first, I guess.
That's right. Yeah.
Work together. You were like, you know, I think you were doing the thing at the Institute.
That's right. The Blob.
The Blob. Called the Blob. And you were like, will you come and play? And I was like, yeah, it'd be brilliant. And I think the Institute was new at the time, and the dance.
That's right. Yeah.
And then I remembered that you went on and you did something else up on the Queensway, because I always remember, because you had Andrew come and play, didn't you?
That's right. Yeah, we did it at Melodies, which was called, funnily enough, I jotted it down, totally new. And we had Andrew Weatherall. Let me think who else. Justin Robertson.
Yeah.
Greg Fenton.
Yeah.
And possibly Steve Proctor. Possibly.
Yeah, okay. Well, hold that thought, because I'm just going to very quickly draw my attention to the people who are watching. We've got quite a few people watching, and Dean Smith shouts out, says, enjoying this, lads. I mean, there's so many people who were influential at that time who were responsible for helping to forge the shape and the landscape of clubbing in the Midlands. Dean is definitely one of them back then as well, isn't he?
Dino.
Hello,
So
Dean.
yeah, this story can be told for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and I will bring so many of you guys on to come and talk to myself, because it's just enthralling to sit and listen. So back to you, Jim. Sorry, and Lee, whoever was in. You were on the timeline, Lee, about you split them.
So that was, I think that was right. So I think the Blob was 90. I think you were still doing your boat trip.
Yes.
Then you started doing that thing up on the Queensway, and I think Mark Belch and I, we'd started to do a Better Way, and I think the first Better Way that we did was 91. Oh no, there's a really important thing before that as well, which was Rufus and Disco Dave.
Yes.
They used to do a thing called the Safari Club on a
Friday night in Coast to Coast.
That's right.
I remember that. But that was the same time as the Hummingbird, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because wasn't it called Bonkers? Wasn't it something Bonkers there at one point as well?
TV studios.
Yeah. Again, changed its name. It was Mr. Moon's Bonkers, and it was Coast to Coast when those guys were doing their little party, which again, sorry to interrupt you, Lee. Again, it was what kind of just adding a little bit more of the scene that was taking place. Yes, there was the mellow and the hardcore, or the jungle techno, and I think also there was quite a lot of little satellite organisations that were kind of the Balearic scene of the UK. There was Justin and Greg Fenton that were doing Most Excellent. There was Venus. There was Flying Records. Nicky Holloway again was kind of part of that, the Milk Bar. So there was a little collective of kind of things that were going on.
The Nottingham guys, you mentioned Nottingham DIY and all those kind of guys as well.
DIY weren't necessarily, they were kind of again separate again, really. And I suppose what was really instrumental was obviously Rufus and Dave were really instrumental, because they brought Flying Records to Birmingham, and Charlie Chester and all that lot, Dean Thatcher. Who else was involved in that? I mean, again, Brandon, that's right, yeah.
They brought the Slam Boys up.
That's right, yes, yeah. And then there were
Justin and Greg as well, Justin and Greg Fenton.
And then a lot of us were going to Venus, and we did Chuff Chuff at Venus as well. We did that a couple of times, but also Flying Records were doing their thing, and Most Excellent were doing a night at Venus. So Venus again was very instrumental, but there was a lot of Brummies going up to Venus. And in fact, we used to do a coach from the depot to Venus. And again, they were, very supportive in what we did, and kind of took an interest. And they, Sam and James came to our boat trips, and I think James Bailey actually played at one of them.
Really?
Yeah. And we used to do after events when we used to do the Chuff Chuff boat trips. I think we did one in a little club just off the top end of Digbeth. Oh God, next to Eddie Daniels Karate Club. I can't remember the name of the little club, a tiny club. And we did a couple after in Snobs, and we also did Venus as well.
Right.
So
you mentioned Snobs. Where in the timeline would have the cake?
Well,
I can't remember the name of the parties. Was the venue, or was it called the cake? Was the party the cake, or was the venue the cake?
Yeah.
It's kind of like where we're at now. If you're talking about, you're at the back end of 1991. Right. I think Nigel Blunt went into Snobs, and I think there was almost knocked the wind out of the sails of the Safari Club at that point.
That's right, yeah.
So many people to go around. Better Way, we'd started doing stuff at the Dance Factory in the Institute, and then you kind of got Snobs. That was the what were they doing for? It was like they were doing Cake, What a Life, and they'd started bringing independent promoters in as well for other nights.
Andrew Birch says Breathless on a Friday.
Breathless, yeah, absolutely. Breathless was there, but you'd also got you'd also got Jonah and the lot from Wolverhampton that
Right,
were doing
yeah.
Love Revolution.
Yeah, that's
They were
right.
doing Love Revolution at the Institute. I think they were doing that alternate Saturdays, and we moved out of the Dance Factory with Better Way, and we were doing alternate Saturdays with those guys over at the Institute. So all of a sudden, there were like quite a few things going on. Jim's the chuff chuff thing had kicked off. You know, Dick was doing his thing.
Yep.
There were like lots of parties happening, and there was a really healthy bar scene around it as well. So the people going out. Oh God, what was that place in Fletcher's Walk underneath the library?
Raphael's.
Notes.
Notes.
Yeah.
So there's good stuff happening there.
Yeah.
49ers.
I know, notes.
Yep.
Notes.
49ers
was pivotal. We used to go to 49ers before. We used to meet in 49ers every week, and then I remember the first time we were going over to Amnesia House in Coventry, myself and all the lads, we were sat there and we were like, so what do we do? You have to take a change of clothes in a backpack, and at some point in the night, because you're going to get sweaty, you'll get changed in the toilets. And I say, but you know, all night, we're going to go all night. And you know the rest of the story.
Yeah, get your game plan together.
Yeah.
So you kind of got into 91, and you know that all of a sudden this Balearic network that Jim's talking about really taken influence in Birmingham, and all of a sudden there were like lots of things happening. There were lots of nights to go to, and I think that move over from 91 into 92, then it exploded again. You know, you've got lots of things happening. I mean, we were doing a midweek at Baker's Decadence that you know ran for 8 or 9 years on a Wednesday night. It was like unheard of. You know, midweek.
I was resident with you there as well, which I totally forgot about.
Yeah, and then you know you got things like Wobble came along, Phil Gifford, and all those things in 92, and then the networks kind of expanded even more. You kind of got Jez Bailey doing stuff over in Wolverhampton, so the thing was like really mushrooming in that very early part of the 90s with like lots of really creative things happening. And I think at that point, you know, you'd started to see a bit of a guest network established.
Yeah.
You know, so you kind of got, you know, I think Better Way, we were bringing people through like Darren Emerson, Alfredo came and played, Brandon used to come and play. Jim, you were bringing like lots of people through, and all of a sudden, you know, it had gone from, I guess, like a local network of DJs to, you know, a sort of fairly established network of guest DJs that were starting to play.
It was quite a close knit. Even though the rave scene was huge, you know, tens of thousands of people around the Midlands, the scene in Birmingham was quite concentrated, wasn't it, amongst a core network of people. Not everybody necessarily knew each other, but you would recognize the same faces for quite a few years at one point. Because that's what I wanted to mention, but I didn't want to interrupt you, Jim. The boat parties, how many people did the original Chuff Chuffs hold?
Those boat parties in Worcester were only for about 150 people.
You know, it's crazy to think they were so legendary, and we would have been part of those. That's quite a click, really.
It's a very, very small clip, but I think what took those boat trips to the next level, for want of a cliche, was we did a couple of boat trips in London, and I mean, for me, they were probably the most magical events that we ever put on. We went along the River Thames, and again, it was Lee, Neil, myself, Dick were DJing, and I mean, that sense of freedom kind of came about because we were along the River Thames. Everybody was just off their heads, and you know, going past the Houses of Parliament, people were just blooming. You know, it just felt as if you were really part of a revolution was really taking place at this moment in time. But I think that the London boat trips, from a you know, an event perspective, made us realise that we did have something that we could potentially move to a bigger forum, which was the first sort of bigger space that we used was a place called Baskerville Hall I don't know whether you remember that. You played that as well, didn't you, Lee?
Where was it? Remind me where that was.
That was in Herefordshire. And what we did, we found this place, and I mean, it was a hotel with a big event room, and it was a bit rough around the edges. It was they had an inbuilt sound system. We added to the sound system, huge stage, and we again, I suppose in a sense, followed the rave model. We had dancers. There was Dick Gordon Kay. We actually brought to DJ for us again through tapes coming into the shop, thinking this fella's quite good, and Dick, Lee, Neil, Phil, and Tony, myself, and Gordon played that particular event, and I mean, there's videos of it online on YouTube, and there was probably about 400 people at it, maybe. But it was kind of from our point of view, it was kind of a defining point where people had come from Coventry, Northampton, Leicester, Nottingham, as well as our core Brummie crowd, and you just thought, yeah, this is something that we can potentially move forward, and it was great, coming from the scene in Birmingham way back, the actual attitude that people had at these events, it was positive. There was, there was a lot of love going on, and from somebody who was a little bit older as well at the time. So I was probably in my late 20s, seeing this, the difference in the way that people were behaving towards each other. And okay, there was external influences going on that was allowing that to happen to a certain extent. But, it was the right moment at the right time. It was the end of Thatcherism to a certain extent. Things were kind of, things were, people were actually feeling that things had to change from that sort of, oppressiveness of the late 80s or mid to late 80s. So, it was an explosion that took place. Yes, there was obviously a musical element. Yes, there was a meeting of minds with a lot of people. But, I think the essence of it took place also because of the political scenario that was taking place as well.
That's why so many people are kind of so excited about what could possibly lay ahead now, the third summer of love, everyone's saying. So let's get us to that point then. So Lee, before we move forward talking about Jim's plans and Jim's club, how did Better Way finally come to an end?
Yeah, I guess that's it. So I'm just looking at the comments. Then on to Winston.
We'd be here for hours trying to talk about all of the different things that went on.
Yeah, get the number 11 home. So Better Way. It kind of ran 91 and it kind of ran till about mid 93. And I'd noticed at that point that I was probably less connected to it, because at that point I'd sort of started to get some gigs on the national circuit. I mean, gosh, I'd never before this whole thing happened, I'd never been on a plane, and I remember getting booked to go and play in Dublin, and I'd never flown in my life. And Kay came with me. I remember it was like, okay, well, take the gig. And I remember being shit scared of flying, like 24 years of age, I've never been on a plane. I remember this plane taking. What made it worse, we got to the airport and it was like propellers. On the plane. And I was like, held up, you're coming into Dublin like this. It was like, So I'd started to get some sort of gigs out and about. And
I wanted to hold that up to the camera and show you. Can you see that on the screen?
What's it say?
Mother.
Ah, yeah.
So is this around that time?
It is round about that time. Yeah, it is round about that time. So it was like, I think some of the gigs, some of those gigs had started to come in before Mother, and I tell you what it was. And again, I'll go back to Mark Baxter. Baxter always used to be like this, right? We need to have the back page in Mixmag we'd do half of it for the shop and half of it for the club, and it was. I learned very quickly that the whole game was about marketing, and I always remember because it like you used to £1,000 for the back page of Mixmag. I used to be going to Mark, please, let's not spend this money again on this back page of Mixmag. But what I noticed was, after about 2 or 3 months of Mark taking out this back page of Mixmag, like, I ended up with an agent. The phone was ringing. You know, I was getting booked to play here, there, and all of a sudden, I'm kind of on a bit of a national circuit, kind of, you know, sort of midpoint '92, and you know, I directly attribute that to Mark putting his foot down, going, we need this back page, because he used to like put the DJs' names on. Better Way used to have half of it, and then Pure Records used to have half of it. Yeah, kind of doing that, and then, you know, sort of started to work on the Mother project, and that obviously that blew up. And I think the last Better Way kind of happened, and it was quite sad because I wasn't here. I was out and about DJing, but I think the last Better Way happened round about September '93, and at that point as well, because the Mother record had taken off, and you know, the whole production thing was happening. I had to kind of reassess my time with the shop as well. So, you know, at that point, I was kind of like, you know, I probably can't do this anymore. You know, I had to make a decision. What is it I want to do? And, you know, that goes back to kind of where I, you know, kind of started, and my roots were like as a musician. So all of a sudden, to have this record and people knocking on your door saying, can you come and do this remix? And, you know, then sort of starting to get things like publishing deals and record deals. It was like, you know, it's everything that I went to London for, to watch the band fall apart, to go, it's strange, isn't it, how it all happens? But then, you know, like kind of 10 years later, it's all happening, and it's
falling in your lap.
Yeah, I've got to do this.
I can hear the heavens have just opened here. I'm not sure if it can get picked up on the microphone, but that's actually what's happening. All the rain's going crazy.
Don't worry about it, mate. It's been like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in a very long-winded way to answer your question, Andy, Better Way ran about May '91 till about September '93, and I think Danny Rampling did the last ever Better Way, wow. And I think at that point it had moved from Snobs. So in its journey, it went from the Institute to Snobs. And here's an interesting one: we wanted to change the name when we went from the Institute to Snobs. And Baxter's like, well, what are we going to call it? And I always used to have this thing where I'd name clubs after the titles of records. So it's like A Better Way. Well, you know, Todd Terry, A Better Way, and Simple, done. And we were moving from the Institute. He's like, what are we going to call this one? We started flicking through my records, went Blancmange. God's Kitchen. I'm going to call this one God's Kitchen.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we moved from the Institute as The Better Way, and then it was Better Way presents God's Kitchen.
I thought he was going to say Blancmange.
And wow. then God's Kitchen then finished at Snobs, and then it was they did Mark and Stuart did Better Way again, and they did a little run over at Coast to Coast at the back end of '93, and I think that's kind of like, you know,
wow. There's another a huge chunk of Birmingham history there. You mentioned God's Kitchen. That's a different, but that's not really my scene, so I'm not going to talk about that too much.
Well, no, because it was the music playlist was still, you know, kind of fairly what we were discussing, but the way that came about was that a guy went out to Australia. I think the guy's name was Tyrone. He used to do all the tapes.
Yeah.
They were like going out to Australia to do some club nights, and I think they got in touch with Mark, and they were like, well, you're not using that. Can we use the name God's Kitchen out in Australia? And it's like, yeah, of course you can. Away you go. This is about '94. Then they came back, and then it became, you know, they carried on using the name God's Kitchen. But yeah, God's Kitchen was '92 at Snobs. Better Way presents God's Kitchen, but not the God's Kitchen.
Yeah, I remember the you guys using the name God's Kitchen. I often wondered whether Tyrone and Chris from Perception, wasn't it? Those two guys. Yes, I was often wondering whether whether you got a royalty for the use of that name.
Yeah, no. That was Baxter just go, yeah, go on, yeah,
have
fine,
it,
we're not using it.
take it. Mental. So I think that brings us then, Jim, back around to your journey and
Okay.
the boat parties, and you did the party in the hall, which I'd like to think I was there, but I as we've already agreed, things were slightly hazy for many of us back then.
Yeah, so Baskerville Hall was the first kind
Baskerville
of
Hall.
I suppose one-off, if you like, where we stretched our wings a little bit, and then they evolved. We did one at a agricultural college in Warwickshire. I can't remember the name of the place, but that we kind of again took it. We had a marquee on the lawn. It was lovely, beautiful summer day, you know, and we booked. It was quite an extensive lineup for that one. There was Dean Thatcher. There was Sasha, Mark Moore, Gordon, myself, one or two others I can't really remember, but that was kind of the turning point, really, where we started to feel that there was an opportunity to stretch this a little bit further than just a Midlands entity. And a lot of the sort of club heads turned up. I think Charlie Chester and all that sort of firm turned up, and you know, people kind of saw what we were doing was worthwhile taking note of.
Well, you're definitely filling pieces of the jigsaw that I'd forgotten about, because this is part of the history that was totally oblivious to.
And then we did another one in Hereford, but the one probably with the most interesting story is we did a venue which was a public school in was it Northampton? No, north of Cambridge, and me and my brother Mick went down to sell the dream to the people that own the school, and we told them, you know, our blag was, it's a fashion ball, we've got a clothes shop, you know, people are going to be there dressed up, there's going to be a fashion show involved and what have you. So that was always our pitch to get the venues, and of course, you know, we could you know, there was evidence of that because we had our clothes shop and what have you. So it was quite easy to put that story across. And we went down. And what was really enticing about this, you know, so there was me and Mick, you know, a couple of sons of Irish immigrants from Handsworth going into this. It was John Major's constituency, who was Prime Minister at the time, and we were kind of killing ourselves laughing. And what we found out, that this was the ancestral home of Oliver Cromwell, so there was an even greater sort of reason to sort of nail this one. So we went in, and you know, there were blue-rinsed women, very posh, and we kind of, as I said, sold the dream. Managed to get the venue, and put the party on, and the I remember the I don't know whether it was the bursar or the person who was in charge of the venue came over and says, "This is not a bloody fashion show, old chap. This is a damn rave." And there was posters of, oil paintings of past headmasters, and somebody got up and drew a moustache on one of them.
Huntingdon. Someone saying Huntingdon.
Huntingdon, that's right. Yes, Huntingdon.
Thank you, Simon.
And you know, for us, I mean, not only did we get through the party, you know, it kind of again elevated our status to a certain extent within the party scene that was going on at the time. But and you know, I think Tongi turned up, Eddie Gordon certainly turned up, who were kind of, well, they were certainly big players. Again, you know, so we were, as I said, that was allowing us to kind of get the recognition in a slightly different way to you, Lee. You know, in the sense you did it with Mother, we kind of did it as a result of sort of stretching out with the parties, and the parties getting that national recognition. And as a result of that, you know, gigs started to come my way, and you know, I was probably ill prepared for them at the time, but nevertheless, you just kind of went on the journey as a result.
Brilliant. It's crazy. So the parties then, at what point did the club open? Okay, well,
we did, when the Q Club first opened, we did the first parties at the Q Club, a thing called the Silver Slip-Up, as we like to regard it as. And it was a great venue. We I don't know how we got introduced to the owners, but the owners, I think, also owned the Marquee Club in London, strangely enough. And I think one of them might have been the manager of Rod Stewart. Now, I can't remember the name of the chap, but huge venue. They, and I suppose for us, it was a real exercise in learning the business of clubland, essentially. I mean, these were very seasoned club owners. And again, we were kind of wet behind the ears to a certain extent. We did deals with various clubs in Birmingham over the years or elsewhere, but most of them were kind of, there were fairly loose arrangements whereby you'd get a bit of the door fee or what have you. But here we had to actually focus on a business deal with them. And I can always remember this term came up the nut. They had to earn certain amount from the door before we got our kickback. And I think everything was kind of included in the nut, including the DJs and what have you, but I may be wrong. But again, it was a big lesson for us in terms of stepping into a more structured business format for getting putting an event on in a big venue. And I mean, the Silver Slipper the first night was huge, absolutely huge. We were probably ill prepared for it. The club certainly was ill prepared for it. There was, the queuing up system was all over the place. The security were all over the place. But I think and we booked it on a weekly basis. And again, it was a huge lineup. We had people like Tong playing. We had Dean Thatcher. I mean, again, I can't remember the full, but it was a big lineup. And the big error of judgment on our part was the fact that it didn't have a licensed bar. Oh, you soon learned very quickly that the first week was huge, but you could just see I think we ran it for 4 weeks, and you could just see a gradual lesser amount of people coming. So by the final week, there was probably about half a dozen in the Q Club. But wow. What you learned is that the people that were interested in the events that we were part of wanted to drink as well as whatever else they participated in, but drinking was still very much a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And I think those events took place in about June 93. And then I think we had done an event in Bonds previous to that. I think we did a Christmas Eve event in Bonds, just a one-off, Christmas Eve 92, which again had Gordon, Phil and Cy Long played, and myself and maybe one or two others. But that was, Bonds was a great club. We kind of recognized that it had a natural atmosphere. And after the Silver Slip Up, we Justin came into the shop. Justin Powers, Justin Bond used to shop with us, and he said, "Would you consider doing something more regularly at Bonds?" And we met his dad, who owned it, and did a deal that was forever argued about. It was an ongoing. We probably wasted more time arguing with Jim Bond in terms of those years that we were doing that event. Than imagine. Most of our time was just wasted talking about what should be paid for the privilege of running the night at the club. But that's another story. But it was August 93 that we started Miss Moneypennys.
Wow. I thought it was way before then. That's insane.
No, and again, from a logistic perspective, we knew that we had a network of people that were in the surrounding areas of the Midlands that we could rely on to bring crowds or come along with their crowds or their friends. We purposely picked our residents. We had one resident who was from Coventry, Simon Owen, who had a decent following of people. We had Russell Salisbury again, who was again part of a fairly tight within the Birmingham scene. And if what was good about Bonds or good about Miss Moneypennys was the fact that we weren't reliant totally on a Birmingham audience. What we were, Birmingham was changing all the time, and there was, as Lee was saying, there was lots of things going on, lots of people associated with lots of different events. So to have any longevity in that world, you've had to have something other than a Birmingham crowd. And we realized, and again, I suppose traveling to the Hacienda and traveling to Venus and various other places over the years, we realized that we had to ensure that this was a destination venue as much as having a core Birmingham audience as well. So it wasn't just quite as simple as putting an event on in Birmingham and hoping that Birmingham people would embrace it. And yes, Birmingham people did embrace it, absolutely. But, it was never totally reliant on that.
So
and
do you find that it got, once it got the huge support from the out of towners, then it became the center point, the huge thing that it was in Birmingham? And also, just ridiculous thing for me to say, I'm sure everyone's totally following where we're going. We're talking about Miss Moneypennys at Bonds nightclub. So how did the name Moneypennys come about?
The Miss Moneypennys name just was word association, really, with Bond Street. It was as simple as that. There was, and again, I think what we were using again was kind of an experience within the world of clubbing that we'd been again very much part of for possibly the best part of 15 years prior to that. That we realised that the thing that made a club work was, number one, the people that went there. Try and keep troublemakers out. Try and allow the atmosphere to evolve as a result of that, and have a gay and female audience as well that would associate. Because again, we're talking about the 1990s. People were, and it was a slightly older audience. What we were aware of, people were still going to clubs to meet, to have relationships. So that was again kind of part of it. So it was kind of mixing all the elements that were part of the club scene that was part of that time, the music, the
drinking and the relationships,
the courting, and also sort of incorporating things that were kind of part of the Birmingham scene or the scene prior to that, which was dressing up, which was meeting people, meeting new people. And again, because there were so many people traveling to us, that made that whole dynamic even more interesting. So it was, we were kind of at the right place at the right time, and a lot of things met that allowed Moneypennys to kind of happen as a result of that. It was very much, a music orientated thing, very much a visual thing. We were aware, because we'd been to Pasha in Ibiza, we'd been to places like Mykonos, we saw dancers and what have you. So we wanted to incorporate that alongside the music, because, we felt that, yes, music was important, but it wasn't just simply, it simply couldn't just be that. It's simply, for a night out, because what you were offering was a showcase for a music style, but also a night out for people. So that element that had to be totally focused upon from our perspective. And I think, because we'd been doing the chuff things, and that was kind of evolving within that framework as well, seeing the rave scene with what that incorporates, and as I said, past experience of our own clubbing thing in the past, just brought it all together. And it was the right time at the right place at the right time, really.
I think that's a really interesting point in there, Jim. And I think that the thing, if you strip all the music away and the marketing aspects, I think there's one really important ingredient that made clubbing in the early 90s work in such a way that it did, was that you'd almost got your first generation of clubbers. So going right back to the Rum Runner, those people are all still out and about. And then you've got this new generation of people getting involved in club culture. And to me, when I look back to the Rum Runner, and I kind of looked to what was happening in Birmingham in the early 90s, early 80s, early 90s, there wasn't that much difference to me. Obviously, the soundtrack's different, music's different, the technology is different. But actually, I think one of the ingredients that actually helped to propel Birmingham was you kind of got this kind of quite clued up first generation clubber that had been going to clubs since the early 80s, and now it's the early 90s, and then this whole new enthusiasm and young people coming in, and I think that was all part of the explosion.
We've got Andy Tomlinson saying Miss Moneypennys, the original glitter box, which is a compliment and a half, and also someone I've got to give a shout out that you both know very well. Mr. Rob Farrell says, "How could I not be here to listen to these two guys?"
Robbie Farrell.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, eventually it was all about the music. The music was fantastic. I've got some great memories of being in Miss Moneypennys, the whole spectacle of it, alongside the great music, and then very quickly it became the place that you had to go to, and you hear the stories, the tales of, people worrying if they were going to be able to get in. You had the door picker on, and some people were getting turned away, and I mean, it was all to recount it like this. It does sound a little bit kind of cliche, but it was quite special at the time. Depending on who you were, if you were getting turned away, you'd tell that tale in a totally different kind of angle than if you were the one in the queue, just really looking forward to getting in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes it sound incredibly elitist, but
that's what I mean. It wasn't, was it?
But what we had was a very small club. We were only using the downstairs part of Bonds, and I think the capacity, if I remember correctly, was 379. I think that's what they had on the wall, and again, because we were bang in the center of it because of the depot. We were selling tickets for everything. We were selling all the rave tapes. So we knew what that scene was about. So, there was an element of people that we certainly didn't want to go to Miss Moneypennys. And essentially the door policy, and at times, we certainly, we did make some mistakes. We put the wrong people to put across that policy. But, I'm being very defensive now, but the essential reason was to ensure that there was the people that went there were not necessarily. I mean, some of the tales that the people were talking about from the rave scene were just horrific, and we didn't want that to happen in the club. We wanted to ensure that the people that were paying good money to get into the club were going to thoroughly enjoy themselves. So. And unfortunately, and if people didn't get in, we were at the shop every week. We were there for people to come and complain to directly, and we would ensure that if somebody was unfairly not allowed to get in for whatever reason, we would put them on the guest list the following week.
So it wasn't it wasn't some Studio 54 nonsense.
Well, I mean, I think if you wanted to be kind of romantic about it, we would quite often try to describe ourselves as Birmingham's equivalent to Studio 54. But again, because there was a lot of celebrities coming to us, that was unheard of in Birmingham prior to that. We had some A-listers coming to Birmingham, coming to the backwater in the bottom end of Newtown, essentially. So, from that point of view, it was, it was incredibly exciting. There was sports stars, there was, I mean, I could list. Kylie was there. I think
there's so many.
There's so many. I mean, it was just incredible. What's his name? Mick Hucklan.
Andy Ward was there.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Andy Ward was a resident for a little while upstairs. Again, so listen, we've been talking for an hour and a half now. We can, and I'm quite happy to sit here to continue talking if you guys are. But what I am going to say is there is so many layers to this story, so many different twists and turns that we can take, that and I know that you guys have got other projects where you can get around to telling this story. So I just want to remind everybody that we are skirting over so much here in this short amount of time, because that's the only way that we can cover all of this. I'm going to come back to you, Jim, and talk about the timeline a little more, and then so with you, Lee, coming back to yourself, you're on the international circuit and you're DJing, you're enjoying it. How long does that continue before the shine starts to kind of fall off of the whole thing?
I think for me, one ingredient made it quite difficult right the way through. And I had my daughter quite young, so we were like 24 when Edie came along. And you know, I can't music. Yeah, I can't say anything. You know, it's been fantastic to myself and my family. And I think I sort of started to realise kind of around about 95, 96 that actually I don't really know my daughter that well. And, you know, I'm living at home with my wife and my daughter, but it's kind of like I wasn't there a lot. And that really sort of started to play on my mind kind of mid-90s. So, you know, and I think one of the other things was, as your kids then start to grow up, and then you sort of start to see people in clubs that are not that much different to the age of your kids. That's another thing that you have to deal with. But I think for me, the kind of the shine started to move off it when you sort of start to assess the impact on your lifestyle and your family life a little bit. And I think that probably took the edge. The other thing that was really interesting as well, that like kind of, you know, you started getting these gigs out of town, and you jump in the car, you're driving up to Manchester, or you know, you're going down to London, and like all of a sudden your mates want to come, and you're all in the car and you're all going there, and then like, you know, a year or two later, no one's asking you to come to the gigs anymore, and then you're in the car, like you're listening to the radio, driving to the gig, and you're going, this feels a little bit like I'm going to work. And then you go, hold on a minute, but I am going to work. But I was doing this because it wasn't work. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. So yeah, it like little things like that sort of started to impact me. And I don't know how you felt, Jim, like once you get out on the road and you're gigging, it's like, you know, everything's like timeline, itinerary, you're working certain times, you know, you have to develop a certain set of, I know I certainly had to develop a certain set of skills, you know, where, you know, people are meeting you and hosting you, and you're taking you for dinner, and it's like, hold on a minute, this is all a bit weird. And yeah, I mean, I had to sort of develop a new skill set just to be able to cope and to deal with that. I mean,
yeah, I kind of embraced it, really. I found it really, I mean, I didn't really expect it to happen, to be totally honest with you. But I also, you know, what I was very aware of was something what you just said. I kind of got my head around the idea that it was a job, and treated it accordingly. You know, I wouldn't drink. You know, I might have a drink after the end of playing. I would, you know, I mean, it was a little bit later. We had our daughter in 96, our first daughter, and you know, again, I wanted to get home after the gigs, so I would get, you know, rather than get a hotel room, I'd ask the promoter to pay for a driver, so I'd get somebody to drive me and get me home after the event or after the gig. So and you know, the novelty of it was, I found it really, I really embraced it. I loved it. You know, I didn't really, you know, maybe I just didn't expect it to happen, didn't expect such a thing to happen, didn't expect to be possibly in the middle of it. So, did I have the skill set to cope with it? Possibly not, but you know, that didn't even occur to me, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah. There was another couple of interesting things for me. I remember I remember Kiss FM when it kind of went legit and legal, and you used to get invited down to do shows in there. I remember going, I won't name the person, the DJ, but I remember this person was on, it was like Judge Jules, Judge and Jury. And this person who shall remain nameless was also doing the show, and they were like, it's brilliant, why don't we meet up for lunch? So we went over to Battersea and had lunch, and it kind of got a bit boozy, which was a bit stupid because we got to go to the radio later on. And like towards the end of lunch, like this person turned around and were like, who's doing your PR for you, Lee? And I was like, what? Like who's doing your PR? Like which PR agent do you pay? And I was like, what do you mean? They were like, well, where you get a week where you ain't got no gigs, and like your PR agent like makes it look like you have, or there's some story in the press that means that you've got a gig the next week. And I'm like, no, I don't get it. But I did get it, and I completely understood what the person was saying. But I was like, the whole reason I got into this was not for that reason.
Yeah.
And I think I sort of battled with quite a lot of the sort of the aspects that went along with it. And I think that the truth of the matter is, for me as well, Andy, is that I'd love going out, and I'd love playing, and I'd love playing music, and I'd love traveling, and I'd love meeting people. But I was very much not this kind of entertainer, hands in the air. I was very much into my craft, head down, wanted to, the best mix, the best tunes, make sure things were in pitch, also in tune, in key, really concentrate, really look down. I wasn't really into this kind of fist pumping showmanship.
Put on the spectacle. Yeah.
And I also liked being in the studio as well, and spent a lot of time in the studio. So I think all of those things combined tend to, kind of chip away at the sheen of the teak.
Mm-hmm. Because one of the things we talked about were before we went live was the fact that you were on Choice FM just before I took over. Yourself and Phil Gifford were sort of like the headliners on Choice of the weekend, and then through a series of events, yourself and Phil left, and it was Ian and myself took over. So that was around about the same time, and that would fall into the same timeline where you were saying you kind of had enough, and so you weren't really that fussed about it all. So that actually all ties in perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that was a weird one. I think we were talking before we came on air, Andy. It was like, Choice FM, and I understood, there's this new station launching, and, I was, I had, because of the remixes we were doing, and, the deals we were doing, like publishing with EMI, and we had a great deal with Network Records through Sony. And quite early on, we realised that we need to put some management in place. And I started working with a guy called Seven Webster, who had a management company called 7PM. And he also happened to manage Sasha and John Digweed. So that opened me out into another circuit and another network again. We were, it works, Andy. Your tune's hot. Everyone wants you to make the same tune for them. Remixes came along, and I think the fact that we got Seven in place, he's in every record company every day of the week. So there were like remixes, like stockpiled for us to do. And he was like, Lee, we've got this job on Choice FM. It's going to be Saturday nights. I was like, well, hold on a minute, how's that going to work? I'm traveling here, I'm traveling there. He was like, you'll work it out. Don't worry about that. And I ended up sort of pre-recording those shows in my studio. And I understood the reason to do it, but it was like I didn't want to do it. And it was kind of like, I kind of had to play the game and do that radio show because we got so much content that we were producing and making. We're doing an album at the time, we're doing remixes, and I totally played the game and understood that we had to do it. But I think I was telling you, Andy, that the fact that because I used to pre-record them, there was an hourly fee that went along with it, and I never kind of got round to invoicing them. And I think it was about 18 months worth of work, and I ended up sort of putting an invoice in for 18 months worth of work. I was like, hold on a minute, what Choice FM were like, hold on, what are you doing? You're supposed to invoice for this weekly. I was like, yeah, I mean, I just never got round to it, but here's the invoice. Can I have the money? We're like, no, you can't. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do it. That was a great reason for me to say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. Seven, they're not paying me. What are we going to do? So yeah, I just said bye-bye at that point, and that was that.
Amazing. Brilliant, wonderful timing. I think that there's so many different opportunities for us to have so many of these conversations with different people. Lee, you've mentioned a few names in this that we could definitely bring on and go back and cover in length a lot of the things that we've discussed tonight, because I'm conscious of taking up too much of your evening. And Jim, I know we've only really just started on the Miss Moneypenny's journey, really, and I know that there's yourself and a couple of others. We could definitely do this again. So can I put you on the spot and say, can we continue this at some point again in a few weeks to tell everybody the next story of the Miss Moneypenny's journey, because that is a truly international, worldwide whirlwind that everybody knows about, but there's so many twists and turns in that story, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to.
Brilliant. And so I know you have both got other projects that you're both very passionate about. Your roots in Birmingham. You're both very passionate about telling these stories and making it correct so everybody knows it. Jim, are there any projects that in the pipeline? I don't know if there are. I'm asking you. I would have thought it would be the ideal opportunity to bring out all of the old footage and get a Miss Moneypenny's movie put together, a documentary or something.
Yeah, I've been in talks with a lot of people about doing something of that nature. We are kind of archiving, because I mean, Rob Farrell, bless him, was taking photographs every week. So we've got a huge catalogue of photographs from the club, both Chuff Chuff and Moneypenny's. There's lots of footage around. So yeah, we are in discussions about doing some sort of archiving scenario. So yeah, I think at some point we'll try and put that together. I mean, it's a big old project, and trying to find the time and I suppose the organizational skills to put something of that nature together would be quite a big old job, and would take quite a long time to put together. But yes, I think at some point we've got to do that. Definitely, I think we owe it to the people that came to us. I think if nothing else, to because there isn't a week that goes by that somebody asks me, when are you going to do Chuff Chuff? When are you going to do a Moneypenny's again? So, there is
we
still
didn't even talk about the reunions, the classical reunions you did a few years ago. We haven't even got. I mean, there's so much more that we can talk about.
No, definitely. So yeah, I'd love to come back and have a chat about these things. It'd be great.
I'm glad to hear that. And Lee, things that Jim has just said there, I know that you can relate to. Do you want to tickle on some of the ideas or some of the projects and some of the obstacles that you're fully aware of a project of that nature involves?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a few things that I'm working on this year. There's a project that I've been working on for 12 years with a guy called Paul Kaminsky. We put a production outfit together. We go out and DJ under the name Disc Amendments. And we have some vinyl coming out this year through Neil Rushton putting together Biosphere Volume 3, which is incredibly exciting. Got to do a sort of remix, refix, re-edit of Neil Howard's Indulge, which was just like absolute honor. We're not worthy. And there's another piece of music that I put together for that particular album as well, which is called Herd Immunity, which explains the science behind herd immunity, which is incredibly exciting. So just heard all the test pressings back from that. It's the whole album sounds amazing. People like Adam Shelton on there, Mark Archer, too many to mention, but really excited about that as a project, and potential launch party around that, and doing quite a bit of work with Neil Rushton around that as well. And another project that I've been working on for probably 2 or 3 years is a project called Centrophonics, which really is a project that documents dance music culture, probably dating back to the late 60s in the West Midlands, in the Metro West Midlands, and how that then connects to modern times. There's potential for it to be a book, which is why I'm working with Neil Rushton on that aspect. We are currently putting the lineage and timelining together, which we've pretty much done. But I was talking to you about it the other day off air, Andy. It gets quite complex when you sort of start to show the project to people and you think you've got it nailed, and then somebody turns around and says, "You're doing dance music and you're not doing reggae or dub." And then you go, actually, we do need to do that. So then you have to then go back to the timeline of everything you've done. But I think it's really interesting that probably, you know, in the late 60s, early 1970s, that there was a load of like working class kids that used to listen to music from Chicago and Detroit. It's just an obvious connection, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And yeah, so Centrophonics want to explore, and again, shown that project to a few people, and there's another project that's potentially going to come off the back of that, which is through Coventry City of Culture, a guy called Darren Emerson, not the Darren Emerson. He's working on a virtual film at the moment as well. So there's just so much going on. But I think, you know, going back to Jim's point, you know, to do something like this, which, you know, Centrophonics, we want it to be something that's a touring exhibition that can go in art galleries around the Metro West Midlands, and to you know, to put together that complete archive and that lineage and that literature for future generations. You know, you need a team of people, and people need to get paid money. Yeah. And you know, it can happen, but I think it really deserves to be publicly funded. And we're having some conversations with people about how we explore that public funding so that the people that actually work on the project can get paid properly. Really, that's my bottom line. So maybe we should talk about that, Jim.
No, definitely. I mean, I've got to.
And I've seen Jez's film In the Queue, and yeah, it's brilliant.
No, it is fair play. Jez Collins is, you know, marvelous at trying to document the Birmingham music scene as a whole, rather than just our specific scene.
Well, but he's an archivist, isn't he?
No, absolutely. You know, and he's a great fellow alongside that. But yeah, just as on another note, funnily enough, I've been involved in this other project, which again is, I suppose, taking dance music into another forum, which is into the theatre. I've written a musical called Ibiza the Musical, which is essentially about, I mean, the narrative is accumulation of a lot of experience that I've had, and a lot of the characters are based on a lot of the characters that I've kind of connected with or come across. So kind of amalgamated a lot of experiences, whether it's characters or whether it's the experiences of being in clubs themselves. And again, going back to what Lee's saying, the difficulty that I've had, you know, this has been an ongoing project for probably 7 or 8 years. I wrote the musical and I thought, oh, here we go, you know, the theatre world will take it on with open arms, but you know, it's a journey in itself, you know. So I'm going through I did a reading for it last year, which it read reasonably well, to be fair. And the dilemma I have now is, again, how do I get it to the point of where it's at? And you know, there's part of me that wants to be very much stuck in the middle of it. You know, I don't really want. And again, even opening those doors is quite difficult. So I'm being sort of optimistic in thinking that theatre may take it on board and see it for what it is. But again, even so, if I was to get to that point, there is part of me that wants to be stuck in the middle of it, because essentially the experience that have been that are put across in this tale are experiences that I've been very much part of. But yeah, I think what's really interesting about our sort of people that were involved in our world is now telling our story and using whatever medium there is to allow that story to be told. Because again, the Birmingham story, in my view, and I'm pretty sure with you two guys as well, needs to be told, because what we were involved with was an incredibly important time for Birmingham, and to a certain extent it has been overlooked from a bigger perspective. Okay, you know, we harbor our interest and continually talk to them, and probably talk to them to our grandchildren, what have you. But I don't want it to just remain sort of family narratives of great endeavors from the past. But you know, it'd be nice if we could sort of forward that that scenario that we were all part of, and sell that story, because, or not necessarily tell that story, because you know, you see other entities and other cities using their cultural experience, and using that to be a big selling point for the cities. Unfortunately, I think Birmingham still hasn't found that way of using that positivity to sell the city of Birmingham to a bigger audience.
I think there's probably, I can't say too much about that, but there's probably some news incoming on that one, Jim.
Okay, brilliant. Brilliant.
You know, using the city's heritage as to kind of overlay that and link up, you know, with other departments within the city. But I think there's some good news on the way.
Oh, fantastic. That's brilliant.
Well, gentlemen, listen, I am going to say to you both, thank you so very much. I will make it my goal to, as soon as I finish this tomorrow, I'm going to pencil in some more dates for both yourself, Lee, and you, Jim, because there are so many different avenues that we can discuss, so many of these things, and again, so much that we've only skirted over here. So I just want to thank you for your time on this Bank Holiday Monday. It's truly appreciated.
Nice one, Andy. Good to see you, Lee.
Hopefully, you guys carry on talking. I'm going to press a button here that's going to kick you out of the Zoom. So that's going to seem all very abrupt and rude, but I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody on the feed, and then I'll message you guys tomorrow. You got any final words?
Just Andy, I think what you're doing is incredible. You need to continue to make this regular as possible. It's such a fantastic thing you're doing, and yeah, it's good. It's just going to grow, mate. So just keep smashing this out.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. I second that emotion. Fair play.
And I will say at the very beginning, I won't get all gushy, but seriously, yesterday after I'd finished talking to you both individually, I sat back and I thought, my God, I forgot just how amazing those two guys are and what an important role you both had in my early development as a DJ. So thank you so much.
Cheers, Andy.
Love you guys. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone in a bit. So there you go. I pressed that button and the guys are gone. This week, Lee says I should do this as regular as possible. I have got a very busy week. Tonight, Brum as fuck, Lee Fisher and Jim Shaft Ryan. Tomorrow night, I'm actually, well, I say tomorrow night, it's actually going to be in a couple of hours. I need to get up at 3:30 in the morning because I'm going to be interviewing a gentleman by the name of Jeff Leach. He's the voice of one of the characters out of Call of Duty called Ghost. And we're going to be talking about the phenomenon of gamer streaming. And would you believe he himself also used to be a DJ? Very, very funny story there. And then on Thursday afternoon, I'm going to be talking to Mr. Lars Berenroth, who's also going to be giving you an online streaming tutorial, some words of wisdom on exactly how you can make yourself look and sound so much better. I can see here on the screen, very quickly looking, people who have liked and shared. I can only see the last 10 names, so you have to forgive me, but thank you so much to Robin, to Andrew, to Paul, to Alex, shouts out to Alex, Yvonne, my lovely wife, to Jeffrey, shouts out to Greg, shouts out to Neil Farrell as well. Thank you all so much for being here, guys. Truly appreciate it. And I will say, for anyone on a small screen or watching the recording, if you felt value in anything you've seen today and you want to help this project grow in any way, then if you look in the video description or on the page description, there's some information on how you can do that. Big shout out to all my Access members who have helped me get to this point here today. Enjoy the rest of Bank Holiday Monday. I will see you live on Thursday afternoon, where I will be talking to Lars Berenroth, and that is going to be at the same time as 6 o'clock. So it's 6 o'clock Thursday, 6 o'clock Thursday evening. Okay, guys, what an incredible conversation that was. I'm really, really excited about the projects that Lee and Jim have got coming up, and I promise you we will be talking to them again in the not too distant. Okay, folks, enjoy the rest of your evening.